This is the second podcast about Chapter 1 that's called Teaching Physical Education and Orientation. There are three different reasons that people usually become physical education teachers. They do it because they are good at it. Second reason is they enjoyed their prior physical education experiences. Or the third reason, they like to work with kids. The purpose of physical education is to educate a person to lead a healthy lifestyle. In order to do that, we need to teach them the skills to be able to participate in those activities after they leave school. Teaching is a complex activity, and as you have already experienced, teaching physical education is not easy. Not anybody can just come off the street and teach physical education because it is also a very risky activity. There are lots of safety issues that go along with it. One problem that we have in physical education curriculum is that we do have a tendency to set unrealistic goals for our students, but hopefully we're going to be able to teach you how to set realistic goals. Finally, teaching is not an exact science. It is both an art and a science, and I have a tendency to lean more toward teaching as an art because of the complicated ways that we have to deal with students. The teaching process must have a clear goal for student learning. These clear goals distinguish us from recreation programs or just programs that quote-unquote roll out the ball. There are three different domains of learning that you have already learned about in your prior experiences in our PHED program. But the first learning domain is psychomotor goals and objectives. That means fitness or motor skill objectives. The cognitive domain, which is knowledge or ability levels in processing information and those types of goals and objectives. And affective domain, which are student feelings, values, social behaviors, and attitude. Each one of these domains has a taxonomy that is associated with it, and you have a handout in this Blackboard section about the three taxonomies, for one for each of these different domains. The Harrow taxonomy is for psychomotor domain, the Bloom taxonomy is for the cognitive domain, and the Krathwohl taxonomy is for the affective domain. Each of these taxonomies lists verbs for each of these domains that describe the content that they're learning in each of the domains. For instance, analyze would be a verb for the cognitive domain. Dribble would be a verb for the psychomotor domain. And encourage would be a verb for the affective domain. These verbs are behavioral verbs are how you tell how to classify each objective for your lesson and or goal for your unit. The NASP National Content Standards were just changed this summer, 2013, to reflect only 5 standards instead of 6 that we had before. Standard number 3 below demonstrates the knowledge and skills to achieve and maintain a health-enhancing level of physical activity and fitness, combined the old standard 3 and 4. After each of these 5 standards, I've put letters to indicate which learning domain that they are trying to teach. These last 2 content standards are, of course, our affective standards. Physical education is the only content area in the United States that has affective content standards, national content standards. There are only 5 content standards, and they have not been reflected in the South Carolina standards just yet because South Carolina has to take the new ones and redo or revise their content standards. But South Carolina still have 6. As future teachers, you are constantly going to have to be advocating for your program in the schools. You have to explain it and you have to defend it to school boards, to parents, and to the students themselves. One of the problems we have in physical education is a lack of accountability because we are not considered a core subject area. However, the more our programs have set and defined goals and they are clear goals, it does help us attain credibility. What goals you choose and what you decide to accomplish as far as your instruction goes has to do with your teaching philosophy. Everyone will teach differently according to what they think is important to learn, and there is no right or wrong way to teach. When teaching, there are pre-lesson routines and post-lesson routines, obviously ones that take place before instruction begins and after instruction begins. It's important in the pre-lesson routines to have something attractive to start with to try to catch the student's attention to get them motivated to do whatever it is you're teaching them that day. It's also good for post-lesson routines to make sure that you have a closure, a cool down, and try to link what you did in the lesson that day, a review of the lesson, to the next lesson that you're going to teach in that area. The biggest difference between elementary level and the secondary level is obviously that in the elementary level they don't dress out, and a lot of times you don't have to take roll either. The teacher directing a movement task or asking the students to do a movement task and the student's response to the task is the most critical instructional unit of analysis in teaching physical education. It's what we do the most. Also, looking down a little farther, a key word here is progression of experiences to meet the objectives. A progression means going from something simple to more complex. It means from going from a foundation to and adding and building content on top of one another. Sometimes we call that scaffolding. There are three types of teacher behaviors in a lesson. One is management or organizational types of things like moving people, space, equipment, and time, and handling student behavior. And then content aspects, that is the subject of the lesson that you're teaching. Non-contributing things are not very often, but it's an example would be another teacher coming into the gym to tell you something. The functions of teaching are pretty self-explanatory, but basically developing the content is the progression, the relationship between the movement tasks and how they build upon each other. Organizing and managing the environment and monitoring student performance has to do with management issues, but it also has to do with your number one priority, which is safety. And lastly, becoming a professional teacher has to do with becoming a reflective teacher who learns and grows from their experiences, and also learns and grows from their experiences after they leave Winthrop University. It's important to keep up to date in your field even after you leave your college teacher preparation program.